If I talk about our solution for a safe disposal of Swiss radioactive waste, is it Nagra's solution or is it our solution? We have made a major step forward in last November by submitting the general license application to make a first step actually the thank you that I mentioned at the beginning, Laura, is not only coming on behalf of Nagra, but also on numerous institutions and contractors that supported us on the way to that step that I mentioned at the beginning. But let's start with our solution to dispose the Swiss radioactive waste. We always distinguish between high-level waste, coming basically from the operation of the nuclear power plants, and from the low and intermediate level waste coming from the decommissioning and of the nuclear power plants, but also from the industry and the medicine. And Switzerland is using nuclear energy to produce electricity since more than 50 years, and it's therefore producing nuclear waste. And according to our law, our duty, and it's our law, it's our duty, is fulfilled once that waste is safely disposed in a deep geological repository according to the Nuclear Energy Act of all of us. But obviously it's Nagra's duty to make a safe proposal for the safe disposal of the nuclear waste. And before we look at the general license application that we submitted in November, and that will be publicly available by the end of next week. So you all will have the chance, if you don't have enough after these 2 days, you will have the chance to look into numerous documents and the complete documentation of our general license application. But before I go to the general license application, let us look back a few decades. As I mentioned, we always distinguish between high-level waste and low and intermediate level waste. And the first concept to dispose nuclear waste underground go back to the 70s. This is the first drawing published, and according to the level of the waste, the depth to dispose the nuclear waste increases. In the first concept in 78, a first site-specific proposal was then made with the proof that the safe disposal of low and intermediate level waste is possible with a project in the center of Switzerland in a marl formation. It's not the Wellenberg, it's the Oberbauernstock, a few kilometers away. That proof of a safe disposal was demonstrated in 1985 and approved by the federal government in 1988. A next step was then the demonstration of a safe disposal of high-level waste in the Zürcher Weinland with the so-called Entsorgungsnachweis in 2002, proposed by Nagra, and also approved by the federal government in 2005 after the assessment of the Swiss authorities and numerous national and international expert groups. The second proposal of Nagra to concentrate the further investigation for the future disposal at the site of Zürcher Weinland was rejected by the Swiss government, and it was decided to define the site of the disposal with a sectoral plan procedure. This sectoral plan procedure ends with the general license application, and our proposal in the general license application is now to bring low and intermediate level waste and high level waste together at one site and to dispose all radioactive waste of Switzerland at one site in Nördlichlägen with a so-called combined repository. So our solution is basically now to bring all the waste together at one site. This is a provisional design how that might look like, or well, actually nowadays we are already convinced that it will not look like this, but this is an example of how it could look like. And Laurent mentioned the exhibition room next door. There you see a 3D model of the site Nördlich-Lägern, and you will find a draw that you can pull out and see another example of the repository design, a slight evolution of that design that we made since we submitted the general license application, but we made draws because we know we will change them maybe every year, maybe every once in a while, but we will definitely have a different layout when we might start the construction of that repository. Lies mentioned the sectoral plan. A sectoral plan is basically an instrument to plan infrastructure of natural interest, such as an airport, such as a high voltage power line, or for example, a geological repository. It started in 2008 with a nationwide search for suitable site. It ended in stage 1 with 6 potential sites, which were reduced by the end of stage 2, ending again in northern Switzerland, turning out to be the Opalinus clay in that area due to the tectonic setting, due to low seismic activity, and due to suitable depths of the Opalinus clay in northern Switzerland. And as most of you probably know, Nagra proposed at the end of stage 2 to put on hold Nördlich-Lägern due to the greater depths and the challenges concerning the construction of a repository in Nördlich-Lägern. And the government decision obliged us to investigate all 3 sites, and as we know today, that was a good decision. Also, as a surprise for us, it turned out that Nagra has clear advantages for the long-term safety, for the safe disposal of the Swiss radioactive waste. That's why we proposed in 2022 Nördlich-Lägern, and we submitted the general license application for that site. But how did we come to that conclusion? Basically, due to a huge investigation program, which will be explained in detail later on. Basically, also only in the 3rd stage, we spent almost 250 million Swiss francs to get a precise picture of the underground and to have a good knowledge of the properties of the rocks that we expect in Nördlich-Lägern, and also to compare the siting regions. There you see how we brought the geometry from the seismic surveys and the properties of the seismic boreholes together and to make our conclusions for our site proposal. As I mentioned, Nördlich-Lägern was also for us a little bit of a surprise. If you look at the regional tectonic setting, I mentioned northern Switzerland is not very much influenced by the tectonic effects of the Alpine formation, and in general you expect a decrease of that impact towards the northeast, and that's also what we expected. But the seismic surveys showed that the largest area of Opalinus clay without major faults is actually in Nördlich-Lägern. And this is one of the main arguments that led to our 3 principal arguments for the site selection in Nördlich-Lägern, which were communicated in 2022 by explaining that Nördlich-Lägern has the best quality of the rock. It has the best flexibility to improve the layout of the repository, and due to its depths, it is also best protected towards erosion. All this information of the investigation program was transparently shared with the Swiss authorities and with the diverse expert groups, especially from the local stakeholders and also from the Canton of Zurich. I see that some of these groups are actually also present today. And I think this transparency was fundamental to make our decision a lot more comprehensible, and that's definitely the result of the sectoral plan led by the Swiss Office of Energy. it made our decision much more comprehensible, which showed which the reactions of the local stakeholders showed after our public announcement in 2022, that in general the reactions were, if this is really the best site, then we have to face that responsibility and contribute to a good solution, really come out of the sectoral plan. If you compare that with times before the sectoral plan, I mentioned Oberbauenstock or Wellenberg at the beginning. At that time, it was much harder to present in front of an audience as a Nagra employee. And if you look back a few more years, when Nagra was investigating a site in the French part of Switzerland, Nagra employees were basically haunted by the local population. This, fortunately, has changed a lot, and this is for sure the result of the sectoral plan. But now let me come back to the general license application. The general license can only be granted if the safety of that project can be demonstrated, as we did before in Oberbauenstock and in the Zürcher Weinland. And to demonstrate post-closure safety, you need to have a provisional design, and you also need to show that that project can be realized according to the Swiss legal framework, especially in environmental laws. So that's why we have a provisional design. You will realize that the design looks very similar to the design we had in earlier stages. But as I mentioned, we basically brought the two waste types together with a common access. And the general license basically defines the site, as was mentioned at the beginning. It is a basic political decision. Everyone who wants to build and operate a nuclear facility in Switzerland needs a general license. And as defined in the law, that defines the site, and it defines a framework of the project at the surface and in the underground. And as you see, our proposal to define that framework, the project area on the surface and in the underground, is a lot bigger than the space we actually need for our provisional design and hopefully also for our definitive design. But it gives us a lot of flexibility to improve our project, and that's what we are doing since we submitted the general license application. We will certainly hear more about that in the afternoon. As I mentioned, in the last decades, we basically brought together all radioactive waste of Switzerland at one site. With our proposal in the general license application, we will see if we can bring it even a bit more together, because our aim is obviously to make a project that is as compact as possible, as little intrusive as possible, but however, with obviously also financial benefits, but however, safety will always be the first priority of our project, and it is mainly guaranteed by the natural barriers. So with any change we make, we will always take care of the geological barriers, which are the main proof. How surprised for a geological repository. The geology is the basis, but however, we cannot go further on this way without a formal step, and that is that general license application. This license application is now being assessed. I'm looking forward to hear if ENSI has already found out something about our argumentation, if they confirm that our arguments and our scientific basis is as solid as we believe it is. And this will then be the next step for a decision foreseen in 2029 by the federal government, which has to be confirmed by the parliament and might be subject of a public votation. So we all can then decide if we want to make a step forward towards a safe disposal of our nuclear waste. And if you want to hear or read more about it, you just have to take a note of these 9 letters. By the end of next week, everything is available publicly on that website. And now I'm looking forward to your questions.